Please, take a moment and close your eyes. Try to recall the distinct metallic slam of a heavy screen door bouncing shut on a warm July evening. Try to remember the exact smell of hot asphalt cooling down after a brief summer rain, mixed with the faint scent of charcoal smoke drifting over the fences of your neighborhood. If these sensations feel incredibly familiar to you, you were likely lucky enough to grow up in 1970s America. Today we are going to embark on a beautiful, slightly melancholic journey back to that era. We are going to look at 20 perfectly normal, everyday things we all did as children back then. These were simply the unwritten rules of our youth, the fabric of our daily lives. Yet if a child were to do these exact same things today, it would be considered reckless, heavily frowned upon, or flat out illegal. As we walk down this dusty road of memory, I will save the most touching, defining aspect of our childhood freedom for the very end, something that truly explains why our generation feels so utterly different from those that came after. Before we dive into those memories, let us pause and remember how time itself felt back then. In the 1960s and 70s, time flowed much slower, like a quiet river rather than a rushing waterfall. There was a profound lack of modern rush. We understood the quiet value of waiting. We waited a whole week for our favorite television show to air, patiently checking the printed TV guide. We waited weeks for a letter to arrive in the mail, tracing the handwriting on the envelope with our fingers. Modern society often believes that because we lacked instant technology, our lives were somehow poorer or more isolated. But we know the absolute opposite is true. Our lives were incredibly rich with genuine human connection. Our entertainment was found in the neighborhood streets. Our social networks were formed on front porches and wooden fences. We were not distracted by glowing screens. We looked each other squarely in the eyes. We lived in a world where parents trusted their children to the world, and the world largely looked out for the children. It was a time of raw sincerity, where the bumps and bruises we collected were just the price of a beautifully unfiltered life. Let us take a journey back to those endless summer afternoons when the absolute best way to travel was sitting right in the back of a rattling pickup truck. If you grew up in the 1970s, you know exactly how this felt. There were no seatbelts holding you down, no padded child seats, just the hot, sun-baked metal of the truck bed beneath you. You would climb up over the heavy tailgate, feeling the rough texture of the paint under your hands, and settle in against the wheel wells. As the truck shifted into gear and rumbled down the country roads, the wind would instantly whip through your hair. The scent of dusty asphalt mixed with the sweet smell of freshly cut alfalfa from the passing fields. We would sit back there for miles, our legs bouncing with every pothole, waving wildly at the cars trailing behind us. It was a feeling of pure, unadulterated freedom that children today will simply never know. Now this is strictly forbidden and highly illegal in most states, heavily fined by the law due to safety concerns. But back then, it was just how families got to the lake, how Little League teams traveled to the diamond, and how we experienced the beautiful open world. Now let us bring to mind the heavy, solid feel of lawn darts in your hands. Back in the day, no backyard barbecue or family reunion was complete without a game of jarts. These were not the flimsy plastic toys of today. These were heavy, aerodynamic projectiles with massive, solid metal tips designed to pierce the earth. You would stand in the thick green grass, gauge the distance to the plastic ring on the other side of the yard, and lob this heavy metal spear high into the air. We all remember the distinct, satisfying thud it made when it struck the dirt. We played this game barefoot, running around while these metal darts rained down from the sky. Today, lawn darts are completely banned and illegal to sell in the United States, remembered only as an incredibly dangerous hazard. But to us, it was just a regular Sunday afternoon. We learned to be aware of our surroundings, to watch the sky, and to quickly step out of the way. It was a game that required a level of personal responsibility and spatial awareness that seems to have completely vanished from the modern backyard. Think back to the enormous amount of trust placed in us when we were sent to the corner store to buy cigarettes for our parents. You would be perhaps 8 or 9 years old, holding a simple piece of ripped notebook paper with your mother or father's handwriting on it. Inside your small pocket, a few heavy silver coins jingled against each other. You would walk down the street, push open the heavy glass door of the local pharmacy or convenience store, and hear the little bell ring above you. The smell of printed newspapers and cheap coffee filled the air. You would proudly hand the handwritten note and the coins to the clerk, who never batted an eye. They would slide a pack of unfiltered cigarettes and your change across the counter. You might even use the leftover pennies to buy a piece of bazooka bubble gum. Today, it is absolutely illegal for a minor to purchase tobacco, and a store clerk would lose their job and face criminal charges for accepting a note from a child. But in our time, it was a profound badge of honor. It meant you were reliable, that you were trusted with an adult errand, and that you were an integral part of the household. Do you remember the feeling of your bicycle cutting through the heavy summer air with absolutely nothing on your head but the sunshine? In the 1970s and 80s, wearing a bicycle helmet was entirely unheard of. We rode incredibly heavy steel bicycles with banana seats and high-rise handlebars. We used wooden clothespins to attach playing cards to the spokes, listening to the rapid, motorcycle-like clicking sound as we pedaled faster and faster. We built precarious wooden ramps out of stolen construction plywood and cinder blocks, flying through the air with reckless abandon. When we fell, and we did fall often, we scraped our knees on the unforgiving concrete, picked gravel out of our palms, cried for a moment, and got right back on the bike. Today, riding without a helmet is against the law for children in many places, and doing so would invite lectures from strangers or visits from the police. But for our generation, the wind blowing freely through our hair was the ultimate symbol of independence. Our bicycles were our horses, our escape vessels, and we rode them with a fierce, unprotected bravery. Let us turn our memories to the playgrounds of our youth, which were essentially towering monuments of solid steel and blistering hot metal. Modern playgrounds are covered in soft rubber mats and rounded plastic edges, but the playgrounds of the 1970s were a completely different world. We climbed massive jungle gyms made of galvanized steel pipes, positioned directly over solid concrete or hard-packed dirt. We rode merry-go-rounds that spun so fast your vision blurred, clinging to the cold metal bars for dear life, hoping you would not be thrown off into the gravel. And who could forget the towering metal slides? In the dead of summer, sitting on that polished steel felt like sitting on a frying pan. You would scorch your legs on the way down, but you did it anyway. Today, these structures violate endless safety codes and have been systematically dismantled and outlawed. Yet those dangerous playgrounds taught us vital lessons about physics, balance, and knowing our own limits. We learned how to fall, how to pick ourselves up, and how to assess risk with our very own eyes. Imagine the long family road trips we took before the era of strict seatbelt laws and heavy car seats. When the family packed into the enormous boat-like station wagon for a cross-country trip, the concept of being strapped down simply did not exist. For many of us, The absolute best place to sleep was the rear window deck of the sedan. You would climb up into that small space right beneath the slanted rear glass, curling up tightly while the engine hummed endlessly through the night. You could look straight up at the passing streetlights and the blanket of stars, feeling the gentle vibration of the road beneath you. Other kids would sleep entirely unsecured in the far back of the station wagon, rolling around with the luggage at every sharp turn. Today, child endangerment laws and strict seatbelt regulations make this completely illegal, and understandably so. But for those of us who lived it, there was an incredible cozy magic in falling asleep entirely untethered in the back of a moving car, feeling safe just because our father was at the steering wheel. Consider the life of a latchkey kid, a term that defined an entire generation. In the 1970s and 80s, both parents began working full-time, and the world adapted in a way that would be shocking today. At 7 or 8 years old, you would wear a shiny brass house key threaded on a shoelace around your neck. After school, you would walk yourself home, unlock the front door, and enter a completely empty, quiet house. You were fully in charge until your parents returned from work hours later. You made your own snacks, usually a thick slice of white bread with peanut butter, completed your homework, and watched afternoon cartoons. Today, leaving a child of that age home alone for hours is considered neglect, and Child Protective Services would likely be called. But for us, being a latchkey kid was a master class in self-reliance. We learned how to manage our time, how to overcome loneliness, and how to handle the quiet responsibility of taking care of ourselves and our homes. It built a tough, resilient character that defined our generation. Let us wander down to the railroad tracks, a place that served as the ultimate childhood highway and adventure zone. Walking along the wooden railroad ties, smelling the rich, tarry scent of creosote baking in the sun, was a completely normal afternoon activity. We would practice our balance by walking entirely on the steel rails for as long as we could without falling off. And of course, we all participated in the grand tradition of placing pennies on the tracks. We would carefully balance a copper penny on the cold steel, retreat to the tall weeds, and wait for the massive, earth-shaking rumble of a freight train. After it passed, we would frantically search the gravel for our beautifully flattened, completely smooth copper souvenirs. Today, walking on railroad tracks is strictly enforced trespassing, heavily fenced off, and highly illegal due to obvious safety concerns. But in our youth, the tracks were an open invitation to explore. They connected our neighborhoods to the woods, to the next town over, and to the endless possibilities of childhood imagination. Think about the lost art of hitchhiking, something that was entirely commonplace for teenagers in the 1970s. If you needed to get across town or even to a different city and did not have a car, you simply walked to the edge of the road and stuck out your thumb. You trusted the drivers, and the drivers trusted you. You would climb into the passenger seat of a complete stranger's car, surrounded by the smell of stale cigarette smoke and vinyl. You would share stories, talk about the local weather, and part ways as friends. It was an incredibly social, deeply communal way of navigating the world. Today, hitchhiking is not only illegal on most major highways, but it is considered incredibly foolish and dangerous. The social trust that allowed hitchhiking to flourish has completely evaporated, replaced by fear and endless cautionary tales. But there was a brief, beautiful window in American history where people truly believed in the kindness of strangers, and a simple thumbs up could get you safely exactly where you needed to go. Do you remember taking a pocket knife to school? Almost every boy in the 1970s carried a small, folding pocket knife in his denim jeans. It was just a standard tool, as common as carrying a comb or a handkerchief. We used them during recess to whittle small pieces of wood under the oak trees, to cut loose threads from our clothes, or to carefully slice an apple from our lunchbox. We would proudly compare the shiny blades and bone handles with our friends. Not once did anyone view these tools as weapons. The teachers knew we had them, and they simply did not care, so long as we did not cause trouble. In modern schools, zero-tolerance policies mean that bringing even the smallest penknife will result in immediate expulsion, police involvement, and absolute panic. It is a profound shift in perspective. To us, a knife was a symbol of utility, preparedness, and growing maturity. We were taught how to respect the blade, how to carve away from our bodies, and how to handle ourselves with a quiet, grounded responsibility. Let us look back at the vintage chemistry sets we received for Christmas, which were essentially small boxes of beautiful, unmitigated danger. Today, a child's chemistry set contains baking soda and vinegar, but in the 1960s and 70s, our metal chemistry boxes contained real glass test tubes, alcohol burners with actual flames, and a wide array of mildly toxic or highly flammable chemicals. We had access to sulfur, potassium nitrate, and iodine. We would mix strange powders together on the kitchen table just to see what would happen. We created foul-smelling gases, small explosions, and strange glowing liquids. The smell of sulfur and burning alcohol filled our bedrooms. Today, distributing these specific chemicals to children is entirely illegal and strictly regulated by consumer protection agencies. But those hazardous little kits were pure magic. They did not just teach us science. They taught us the thrill of true, dangerous discovery. We learned to respect the elements, and we felt like brilliant, mad scientists in our very own homes. Consider the utter freedom of roaming the neighborhood with a loaded BB gun. For many of us, getting our first Daisy or Crossman air rifle was a major rite of passage. We would sling the gun over our shoulder and wander into the nearby woods, or even just down the suburban alleyways. The distinct smell of copper BBs and the slick feel of machine oil on the barrel are etched into our memories. We spent hours shooting at empty tin cans lined up on a fence, listening to that satisfying metallic ping. We learned how to aim, how to hold our breath, and how to carry a firearm safely. Today, discharging a BB gun within city limits is illegal in almost every town in America, and walking down the street with one would immediately trigger a massive police response. But back then, it was just a normal part of growing up. Our parents taught us never to point it at a person or a songbird, and we obeyed. We policed ourselves, understanding the heavy responsibility that came with holding even a low-powered rifle in our hands. Think back to the chaotic, thrilling nights around the 4th of July, specifically the intense neighborhood Roman candle wars. When the summer sun went down, teenagers and kids would gather in the middle of the street, armed with long cardboard tubes filled with explosive powder. Instead of safely planting them in the ground, we held them tightly in our bare hands. When the fuse hit the powder, the tube would kick back, shooting balls of blinding green and red fire down the street. We would actively aim them at each other, dodging behind parked cars and large oak trees, screaming with laughter as sparks rained down on our hair and clothes. The smell of thick sulfur and burnt paper hung heavy in the humid air. Nowadays, aiming a firework at another person is a serious criminal offense, and Roman candles themselves are entirely illegal in many states. Looking back, it was incredibly dangerous, but the adrenaline rush and the vibrant colors exploding in the dark street created bonds and memories that we still cherish deeply to this day. Do you remember how we celebrated Halloween? Trick-or-treating in the 1970s was a completely unsupervised, wildly independent adventure. We wore cheap plastic masks with thin elastic bands that snapped against our hair, breathing heavily through tiny mouth holes. But the most amazing part was that we went out entirely alone. Until you were 8 or 9 years old, parents stayed home to hand out candy. We would grab a pillowcase from our bed and wander the dark streets with our friends until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We knocked on the doors of complete strangers, walking miles away from our own neighborhoods. Today, curfew laws and intense parental fears mean children must be escorted at all times, often restricted to daylight hours or organized events. But our Halloween nights were steeped in mysterious, thrilling autonomy. We navigated the dark sidewalks, traded our heavy candy bars under the streetlights, and experienced the pure joy of navigating the night world completely on our own terms. Let us fondly recall the absolute peak of free-range parenting, simply known as playing outside until the streetlights came on. This was the universal law of childhood in the 70s. On a Saturday morning, you would eat a bowl of sugary cereal, run out the back door, and your mother would simply say, "Be back by dark." You were gone for 10 straight hours. You built forts in the woods, waded through muddy creeks, and rode your bike across town. There were no cell phones to track you, no check-ins, just complete and utter freedom. The only clock we needed was the sky. When the warm, orange glow of the street lamps began to flicker and hum to life, we knew it was time to pedal home. If a child of 7 or 8 was found wandering miles from home alone today, the authorities would be called immediately for child endangerment. But this incredible freedom gave us a profound sense of direction, imagination, and independence. The world was our playground, and we explored every inch of it without a single adult watching over us. Think about how the youngest among us traveled in the family automobile. Long before the invention of strict 5-point harness car seats, toddlers and young children had free rein of the front seat. Do you remember standing up on the wide vinyl bench seat right next to your father while he drove? You would rest your small hands on the heavy dashboard, looking out the giant windshield at the world rushing by. If the car had to stop suddenly, your mother's right arm would fly across your chest like an automatic safety bar. That maternal instinct was our only airbag. We remember the feeling of our bare legs sticking to the hot vinyl seats in the summer, peeling ourselves off when we finally arrived home. Today, having a toddler loose in the front seat is incredibly illegal and heavily penalized, as it truly is deeply unsafe. Yet there is a vivid nostalgic warmth in remembering that closeness. Standing shoulder to shoulder with our parents as they steered the massive steel automobiles of the era is a memory uniquely ours. Do you remember walking to the local ice cream truck or candy shop to buy a pack of candy cigarettes? These were small, chalky sugar sticks cleverly designed to look exactly like real cigarettes, complete with a red dye mark on the tip to simulate a burning cherry. Some of them even had a thin layer of powdered sugar inside the wrapper, so if you blew through them, a puff of sweet white dust would come out, looking exactly like smoke. We would stand on the street corners holding them between our index and middle fingers, pretending to be sophisticated adults. We mimicked the grown-ups we saw in movies and in our own living rooms. Today, manufacturing and marketing candy to look like tobacco products is illegal in many places and highly condemned everywhere else,
as it is seen as actively encouraging a dangerous habit. But for us, it was entirely innocent play acting.
It was just sweet, chalky sugar that snapped loudly when you bit into it, a funny little prop in our endless childhood games. Let us recall the intense thrill of exploring abandoned buildings, old factories, and empty rock quarries. In every town there was always an old, forgotten structure that parents told us to avoid, which only made it entirely irresistible. We would squeeze through holes in rusted chain-link fences, ignoring the faded "no trespassing" signs. We walked through empty, echoing hallways, the sound of broken glass crunching loudly under our canvas sneakers. We found old machinery, strange vintage bottles, and hidden spaces that we quickly claimed as our secret clubhouses. The dusty air smelled of old wood and damp earth. Today, doing this would immediately result in trespassing charges, heavily enforced by security cameras and local police. It is considered legally hazardous and unacceptable, but to us, these forgotten places were grand castles and ancient ruins. Exploring them required bravery, teamwork, and an adventurous spirit. We felt like true explorers mapping out the forgotten edges of our own hometowns. Think back to the immense pride of being allowed to drive a vehicle long before you were legally of age. In rural and suburban America during the 70s, it was completely normal for a father to let his 10 or 11-year-old child drive the family car or a heavy farm tractor. You would sit on your father's lap, your small hands gripping the enormous thin steering wheel, feeling the powerful vibration of the engine. Eventually, you were allowed to sit in the seat alone, barely able to see over the dashboard, stretching your toes to reach the heavy gas pedal. You drove slowly down dirt roads or across open fields, glowing with the pride of doing adult work. Today, allowing an underage, unlicensed child to operate a motor vehicle is a serious crime, punishable by heavy legal consequences. But back then, it was an essential rite of passage. It was how knowledge was transferred from one generation to the next, building a quiet, profound bond of trust between parent and child under the wide open sky. Finally, consider the incredibly hard physical jobs that very young children were allowed to do. Many of us had paper routes at 10 years old, requiring us to wake up at 4 in the morning. We hauled massive, incredibly heavy canvas bags filled with printed newspapers through the freezing snow or the hot summer dawn. We smelled the fresh black ink and folded the papers with precision, tossing them onto front porches while the rest of the world slept. Some kids worked on local farms, operating heavy machinery or bucking hay bales for pennies. Today, strict child labor laws make it completely illegal for children of that age to perform such heavy, early morning or hazardous work. But those difficult jobs taught us something that cannot be learned in a classroom. We learned the absolute value of a hard-earned dollar. We learned discipline, grit, and the quiet dignity of a job well done. Those early mornings in the dark built the strong, uncompromising work ethic that still drives our generation today. Looking back at all these deeply cherished memories, it becomes remarkably clear that we do not just miss the heavy steel bicycles or the lack of modern rules. What we truly miss is the profound sense of trust that defined our childhood. We miss an era where time moved at a human pace, where neighbors looked out for one another, and where children were allowed to fall, scrape their knees, and learn how to stand back up on their own. We grew up in a beautifully imperfect, dangerous, and wonderful world, and it shaped us into the resilient people we are today. If this journey back in time brought a warm smile to your face, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on this video. It truly helps us keep these precious memories alive. Now, I have an important question for you. Which of these things did you do the most? Or what illegal thing did you do as a kid that I entirely missed? Please share your personal stories in the comments below. I absolutely cannot wait to read them and remember those golden days with you.